The difference between those who achieve greatness and those who settle for mediocrity lies in a shocking discovery by Napoleon Hill. Their greatest weaknesses are exactly what can catapult them to the top. While most people try to hide their vulnerabilities, you are about to discover why they are your secret weapon for success. Your fears, your doubts, that feeling of inadequacy that you carry, Napoleon Hill proved that these are precisely the characteristics that separate the conquerors from the conformists. Here is the truth that will change everything. What you consider your greatest weakness is, in reality, your most powerful asset. For 20 years, Hill studied the richest and most powerful men in history: Andrew Carnegie, Henry Ford, Thomas Edison. What he discovered goes against everything you believe about success. Each of these titans had devastating vulnerabilities, but they did something that most never do. They transformed their greatest weaknesses into weapons of conquest. Today you will discover exactly how to identify and reconvert your vulnerabilities into real power. Because what is limiting you now can become what propels you to greatness. 1. The discovery of self-doubt as fuel. The number one vulnerability that Hill identified in all great winners was self-doubt. Yes, you heard that right. All of them, Carnegie, Ford, Edison, were consumed by doubt about their own capabilities. They questioned whether they had what it takes, if their ideas were valid, if they could overcome obstacles. Thomas Edison, the man who revolutionized the world with his inventions, spent sleepless nights tormented by doubt. He didn't know if he could make the incandescent bulb work. He didn't know if his theories about electricity were correct. He constantly questioned his own abilities. But here is the crucial point that Hill discovered. Edison didn't try to eliminate this doubt. Intro end, he transformed it into fuel. Every time doubt appeared, Edison used it as a sign that he needed to work more intensely, experiment more, try one more time. Doubt became his most powerful motivator. When he doubted a theory, it meant he needed to test it 1,000 times until he was certain. When he doubted an invention, it meant he needed to perfect it until it worked perfectly. Hill discovered that there is a fundamental difference between those who achieve greatness and those who settle for mediocrity. It's not the absence of vulnerabilities, it's the ability to recognize them and transform them into weapons. Now think about yourself. How many times have you felt this same doubt and interpreted it as weakness? How many times have you used doubt as an excuse to stop, to give up, to not try? 2. The strategic mapping of your vulnerabilities. Henry Ford, the man who revolutionized the automotive industry, had a vulnerability that almost destroyed his career before it even began. He was considered an impractical dreamer. Everyone around him said his ideas were impossible, that they would never work in the real world. Ford could have interpreted this as a sign that he should give up, that he wasn't cut out for great enterprises. Instead, he transformed this perception into his greatest trump card. Every time someone said his ideas were impossible, Ford saw it as confirmation that he was on the right path. He understood that if his ideas were obvious to everyone, then anyone could execute them. The fact that they seemed impossible meant that he was seeing something others couldn't see. This vulnerability, being seen as an impractical dreamer, became his trademark. Ford began to actively seek out ideas that others considered impossible. He specialized in transforming the impossible into reality. However, here is the crucial point. Ford transformed this perception into his greatest strategic advantage. Now I want you to do a mental exercise with me. Think about your greatest professional insecurity. Maybe it's the feeling that you don't have enough experience. Maybe it's the fear that you're not smart enough. Maybe it's the belief that you don't have the right connections. This insecurity you are thinking about right now, this is your raw material for greatness. Hill discovered that Andrew Carnegie, the richest man of his time, had exactly these same insecurities. Carnegie started as a poor immigrant, working manual labor jobs with no formal education, no connections, nothing beyond his own hands. He could have used these limitations as excuses. Instead, he transformed them into strategic advantages. The lack of formal education meant that he wasn't trapped by traditional business methods. He could think outside the box because he had never learned that a box existed. The absence of connections forced him to develop exceptional relationship skills. He became a master at creating alliances because his survival depended on it. Each vulnerability became a powerful tool in his hands. 3. Hill's secret transformation mechanism. The difference between vulnerability and strength isn't in the vulnerability itself, it's in the interpretation you give it. When you see a limitation as evidence that you're not capable, it becomes exactly that, a paralyzing limitation. Think of vulnerability like a lump of coal. It can remain buried forever, heavy and worthless, or it can endure extreme pressure until it transforms into a brilliant diamond. The pressure is the conscious reinterpretation that you apply. Think of vulnerability like a lump of coal. It can remain buried forever, heavy and worthless, or it can endure extreme pressure until it transforms into a brilliant diamond. The pressure is the conscious reinterpretation that you apply. The pressure is the conscious reinterpretation that you apply. But when you view that same limitation as valuable information about where you need to grow, as motivation to develop unique skills, as an opportunity to create solutions others haven't even considered, then it transforms into power. Hill observed that all great achievers had one characteristic in common. They reinterpreted their vulnerabilities as competitive advantages. John D. Rockefeller had a vulnerability that could have destroyed his business career. He was extremely introverted and struggled to express himself in public. In a world where great negotiators were renowned for their eloquence and commanding presence, Rockefeller appeared to be at a severe disadvantage, but he transformed this apparent weakness into his greatest strategic advantage. Instead of trying to become a charismatic speaker, he specialized in being an exceptional listener. While other negotiators talked, Rockefeller listened. He captured information that others missed. He understood people's true motivations because he paid attention to details that compulsive talkers overlooked. His introversion became a competitive advantage because it gave him access to a form of intelligence that typical extroverts couldn't develop. 4. The deliberate practice of reinterpretation. Hill discovered that this transformation doesn't happen automatically. It requires a conscious and deliberate process of reinterpreting your experiences. Hill discovered that this transformation doesn't happen automatically. It requires a conscious and deliberate process of reinterpreting your experiences. Every time you feel a vulnerability emerging, doubt, fear, a sense of inadequacy, instead of trying to suppress or run from it, you need to ask a different question. How can I use this as fuel? When doubt appears, ask, what is this doubt telling me about where I need to focus my attention? When fear arises, ask, what skill is this fear motivating me to develop? When you feel inadequate, ask, what unique perspective does my inadequacy provide that others don't possess? Hill noted that great achievers developed an automatic reflex. They immediately sought the hidden potential in each apparent limitation. 5. Creating your personal transformation system. J.P. Morgan, the legendary Wall Street financier, had a vulnerability that could have ruined his reputation in elite business circles. He came from a middle-class background and lacked the blue blood pedigree expected of great financiers of his era. Morgan could have tried to hide his origins or attempted to imitate the mannerisms of high society. Instead, he transformed his ordinary origin into his greatest competitive advantage. He used this understanding to create financial products that spoke directly to the needs and concerns of America's emerging middle class. His common origins became his unique ability to build bridges between different social classes, which was fundamental to his success in democratizing Wall Street investments. Now you need to identify your equivalent to Morgan's common background. What aspect of your upbringing, personality, or experience have you been trying to downplay or hide? This might be exactly the unique perspective you need to embrace and develop. Hill discovered that each great achiever had a moment of revelation where they stopped fighting against their vulnerabilities and began working with them. This moment of acceptance and transformation marked the turning point in their journeys toward greatness. You've identified your vulnerabilities. Now comes Hill's secret method for transforming them into weapons. The transformation you've begun is just the beginning. Now comes the secret method for transforming them into weapons. The transformation you've begun is just the beginning. But what I'm about to reveal will completely transform your perspective on failure. It's how Hill converted his greatest weakness into a billion-dollar asset. Now that you've mastered identifying and mapping your vulnerabilities, we arrive at the core of Hill's method, the active reconversion of these weaknesses into driving force. 3. The psychological reconversion technique. Hill's revolutionary discovery was simple. All great achievers shared the same characteristic, not the absence of fear, but the mastery of converting it into pure fuel. Take Henry Ford as the perfect example of this conversion. Every mockery about his impossible horseless carriages transformed into fuel to prove the skeptics wrong. Every "you're out of your mind" became energy to work 16 hours a day perfecting his vision. The reconversion technique works like this. First, you take your main vulnerability, the one we identified in the previous step. Let's suppose it's the fear of failure. Instead of running from it, you'll embrace it completely. You'll say, "I'm afraid of failure, and that's exactly why I'm going to prepare extraordinarily." The formula is scientific. External skepticism, internal obsession, a revolutionary innovation. Every impossible that Ford heard became a specific technical challenge to solve. Listen carefully. Your subconscious mind cannot distinguish between imagined scenarios and real experiences. When you visualize failure, your brain believes it has already happened. But when you redirect this energy, when you take that fear and transform it into fuel for preparation, you are literally rewiring your brain for success. 4. The method of amplifying inner strength. Thomas Edison failed over 1,000 times before perfecting the incandescent light bulb. Many called him foolish, stubborn. But Edison developed something Hill called inner amplification force, the ability to transform each failure into valuable data for the next experiment. Inner strength is not something you are born with. It is something you build, method by method, choice by choice. And here is the secret that set Edison apart from all other inventors of his time. He created a system of emotional amplification. Here's how it works. Every time you face resistance, internal or external, you don't back down. You double down. You take this resistance and use it as proof that you're on the right track. Because remember, average people don't face resistance, they stay in their comfort zone. Resistance is the signal that you're pushing boundaries and growing. When someone doubts you, when your own mind whispers that you should quit, you amplify your determination. You say, "This is exactly what I expected. This is exactly what it means to be building something game-changing." Here is the secret Hill discovered. Amplification is not automatic. It is a deliberate system that requires daily mental training. Think of resistance like weights at the gym. The greater the resistance, the stronger the muscle you build. Edison didn't see those 1,000 failed experiments as failures. He saw them as valuable data that brought him closer to the breakthrough. Start your morning by remembering why you're doing this. Not just what you want to achieve, but why it matters to you personally. Hill discovered that great achievers always had an emotional why stronger than any obstacle they could face. 5. The definitive transformation of vulnerability into dominance. With psychological reconversion mastered and your inner strength amplified, we arrive at the final stage of Hill's method. John D. Rockefeller faced devastating criticism, was called a robber baron, accused of being ruthlessly ambitious. This is the final transformation Hill teaches. When you master your vulnerabilities, when you redirect them into strength, you don't just overcome your limits, you completely redefine who you are. You become someone who doesn't avoid challenges, but actively seeks them out. Think of this as a complete metamorphosis. A caterpillar doesn't try to remain a caterpillar while growing wings. It completely surrenders to transformation. Similarly, when you embrace your vulnerabilities as fuel, you're not just improving, you're reinventing yourself from the ground up. Vulnerability becomes dominance when you stop trying to hide it and start leveraging it strategically. When you admit, "Yes, I'm afraid of not measuring up, and that's exactly why I'm going to become exceptional." This brutal honesty with yourself is what transforms fear into rocket fuel. The great visionaries who transformed our world didn't choose the easy path. They chose to transform their greatest vulnerabilities into their greatest strengths. And you can do the same thing starting right now. Remember, your mind is already wired to protect you from failure, keeping you safely mediocre. But when you apply Hill's methods, when you redirect your vulnerabilities and amplify your inner strength, you're completely reprogramming your mental operating system. Every time you choose growth over hiding, every time you transform resistance into determination, you're strengthening your achievement muscle. And like any muscle, the more you work it out, the stronger it becomes. Now you have something most people will never possess: the ability to recognize your vulnerabilities as fuel for greatness. You've discovered the 5 methods that separated Carnegie, Ford, and Edison from ordinary people: identifying vulnerabilities, strategic mapping, psychological redirection, amplifying inner strength, and transforming into dominance. But knowledge without action is just entertainment. The difference between those who absorb these methods and transform their reality and those who simply forget them lies in the decision you will make right now. You have 2 choices before you: continue treating your vulnerabilities as limitations, or transform them into your greatest strategic asset. Andrew Carnegie didn't wait to feel confident about his lack of formal schooling. He transformed it into his unique ability to think outside conventional business patterns. Your transformation begins by identifying a specific vulnerability you carry. That doubt about your capabilities, that fear of not being enough, that feeling of inadequacy. This is your raw material for greatness. Only one decision separates you from mediocrity: starting to transform your vulnerabilities today, not when you feel ready, but right now, with all the imperfections you carry. Edison transformed his 1,000 failed attempts into priceless data. Henry Ford converted skepticism into unshakable determination. John D. Rockefeller used his introversion as a competitive edge. Now it is your turn to apply these methods. The question that will determine your future is straightforward. Which specific vulnerability will you start transforming today? This decision will distinguish you from those who merely consume motivational content and place you among those who truly transform their reality. If Hill's methods have sparked something in you, if you recognize that your vulnerabilities can become your greatest asset, keep exploring these strategies with us. Subscribe to discover week after week how history's greatest visionaries transform their limitations into extraordinary achievements. In the comments, share which vulnerability you identified in yourself today. When you publicly declare your intention to transform, you activate the same powerful mechanism that Carnegie, Ford, and Edison used: public commitment that supercharges your determination. Your imperfections aren't obstacles. They're the raw materials of your future greatness.